welcome to the Workforce Observer. We are pleased to have with us Michael Marger, who is responsible for the talent brand at Samsara, a company that is a leader in physical operations technology. Michael is a talent brand enthusiast, believing that great companies shine from the inside out, placing people at the center of the story that he likes to tell. Welcome, Michael, and I'm very excited to have you. And I know that employer branding is evolving really quickly, because companies obviously want the best people and to build the best teams. So what does talent branding involve? Tell us a little bit of how it works. And before you jump into that, also a one-liner on Samsara. I mean, I kind of get it, but what the company does.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thanks for having me. Samsara is essentially trying to create a safer, more efficient, and sustainable world by creating technology for industries that have physical operations. So if you think construction, trucking, utilities, we work with airports, we work with companies like DHL. And so we are giving them ways to digitize their operations to make better, more informed decisions, leveraging technologies like AI, so that they can, we're literally helping companies save lives, reduce emissions, and save millions in dollars every year. So it's a pretty
cool mission.
Yeah,
it's a cool mission.
I like it. It's what brought me there.
Okay, great. So tell us, I'm curious about talent branding. What is it and how does it work?
Yeah, it's a great question. Talent branding is something that has been bubbling up more recently in the United States. It actually started in Europe. When the EU was initially formed, countries had free movement of labor. And as a result, countries started competing for that labor. And to stay competitive, companies would, similar to how branding works with marketing and sales to attract customers, professionals started doing something called talent branding, employer branding, to work with recruiting and sort of employee experience folks to attract and retain talent. So it is essentially working with a lot of the same elements that a marketing and branding organization does, but their funnel is with talent all the way from someone just learning about who your company is to them joining the company, going on and having a rich and fulfilling career at that company, and then leaving them hopefully better than how you found them to move on to the next journey and say great things about their time at your company. So
is the full cycle. So is there an intersection between talent branding and employer branding? How does...
I think they're two sides of the same coin. So
okay, explain.
Employer branding is more top down, where this is how a company would like to be perceived. And then talent branding is more grassroots, where you are using your employees to represent your brand by sharing their personal work experiences. And so I would say really my work is the combination of the two. I guess they just haven't found a word to mesh them together just yet. But right. I would say oftentimes the way that I balance my work, it's 80% in who we are today to 20% who we want to aspirationally be, and the type of people we need to attract to get to our next stage of growth and development.
And since doing this, why would you say this is important? Why is this important?
Yeah. In the US, there are, there's a few reasons why, particularly in the US, this is important.
Yes.
I would say our labor market is getting much tighter. Baby boomers make up about 20% of the workforce, and they are retiring, and that is going to create a huge gap. And on top of just that gap alone, if we look at technology and healthcare and sales professions, there is already a gap that exists, and so this exodus of an entire generation is only going to put more pressure and demand for quality talent. And so, for example, engineers, these are rough numbers, but there are about 400,000 engineers needed in the United States for open roles, but we're only graduating 200,000 engineers. And so when we look at the competitiveness for top talent, talent is what is going to make or break your organization. And so
Right.
companies need to get more competitive in how they are looking at communicating themselves, as well
Right.
as, really trying to get clear on who is the right person for their
Right.
organization and making sure that they can reach them and bring them in.
It sounds very cool. So today's market, it's totally an employer-driven market. How is that working? How's that playing out?
Yeah. And this is a cycle, right? I would
Right.
say like it's an employer market right now. We look back at 2020, lots of
Yeah.
uncertainty. There was
Right.
layoffs, and then 2021 was sort of like the rubber band snapping back in and realizing that there was going to be a lot of recovery. And so people started getting really competitive. Salaries were really high. And then as soon as we got into 2022, where there was inflation and economic concerns, we had our first rounds of tech layoffs. And I'll
Right.
probably speak mostly to the tech
Yes.
industry since that's
That's
where
fine.
I'm at. So there was about 80,000 layoffs. And then we
Okay.
get into 2023 when this peaked, and because people were essentially like over hiring in 2021, we had another 150,000 layoffs. This year, 130,000 layoffs. And we're also seeing that pendulum of like people wanting remote work and asking and that high demand for remote work. And we're seeing sort of the screw being tightened on like return
Tightened.
to
Yeah.
office. And so it's been interesting to see how right now employers have a lot of power. The thing is this is cyclical. So if we look at sort of what the next couple of years are going to look like, it's probably going to swing back to talent again in terms of who's going to be the more empowered side between this relationship.
Right.
And that's simply because if we look at this gap of how many jobs are open and available to like what is actually needed
Right.
in terms of actual graduation rates,
Right.
it's sort of inevitable that this is going to swing back.
Got it. I guess I know, and one of the things I was really excited about, talking with you today is about you do talent branding for internal employees, the people who work at Samsara, and you also mentioned that you do talent branding for what I guess the extended workforce. Explain that what you do, and I guess what are the similarities, differences? Because a lot of people, there's so much of contracting going on right now, right? So it's good to know what you do. So for
Yeah.
them.
And talent branding and employer branding, honestly, it can differ from organization to organization depending on what their needs are, how leadership looks at this, where they believe the priorities are. And I have a very cross-functional role because I'm not like a marketing organization where I have a robust set of resources to work from. I have to be
Right.
very creative
Right.
in telling stories effectively and efficiently.
Right.
And I also work with, internal comms, recruiting, people partners. I work with like marketing and branding. And so I have quite a large stretch on that alignment. And right now,
What about talent acquisition? Do you work with the talent acquisition
talent
teams too?
acquisition, yeah, I was bundling that like recruiting. Yes, talent acquisition. Recruiting is a
Okay.
large organization,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
talent acquisition for sure.
Right.
I would say talent acquisition is almost like the dartboard, and talent branding is like throwing the darts and making sure that
Right.
we're like hitting the right audiences.
Right. Right.
I would say the internal side of things, I work a lot with internal communications and
Okay.
talk about, what kind of messaging is going to be important for that audience.
Okay.
What are some assets and materials that we can create to help celebrate, get people excited about, say, we have a company anniversary or a new product launch, and we
Okay.
want to show like how this product was made and celebrate the people that did such great work.
Right.
And so we are trying to help amplify communications internally with compelling content. But
Right.
my work is, I would say, more heavily dominated by attracting new talent, especially just where Samsara is at the moment. We're growing
Right.
incredibly fast. And so that is definitely front and center for leadership at the moment.
So, work with me. So say there is a contract. Firstly, you're talking to a talent acquisition team, and there are a couple of contractor roles that have to be filled. So this has already been determined that it's not going to be full-time.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a contracting position, maybe for a year. I'm just, like it's a hypothesis. So what would you do then? So they say, hey, if we're trying to get these roles filled, it's not for an employee, it's for a contractor. How would you proceed? What would you do?
Yeah, it depends. I would say, so I create something at its core called an employee value proposition.
Right.
It is here's our core pitch to why someone would want to work at this company.
Okay.
And then I also start then tailoring that core pitch depending on who I am targeting in that, whether they are contractors or full-time or sales or engineering. It's something that I explore on sort of a team-by-team basis. And so for contractor roles, I need to look at what are truly the benefits of someone working at your company within a contracting position. Is it, they get work flexibility? Is there potential to join full-time after 1 year? So more this being like a trial period. Are they getting to work on, anything particularly interesting? Is it more strategy based, or is it more like high scale, high volume hiring roles where people can, quickly learn new skills? So it depends on what talent is going to get out of that, and then making sure the communications are very specific around that to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. We also don't want to attract everyone all the time, right? Because then it gets noisy. So, we're not I would say if you're not like a Google or Amazon or Microsoft, you don't need the whole ocean. You just need a little sliver of it. And so if you can get very clear on what you are looking for, who you're looking for, what is going to be attractive to them, and optimize around that, you can really secure a great slice of talent that is going to help you get to your next stage of development.
So I guess these stories are put out where your group of engineers or sales professionals, I guess, hang out or are at. I'm assuming that you don't really do job boards and stuff because, if you're looking for specific skills, so maybe there is some of that as well.
Yeah, and this is where the conversation between talent acquisition and marketing and talent branding, you need to have a conversation because those lines can blur pretty quickly. I've dabbled in the talent marketing where I've looked at certain jobs boards, especially if you go international. You need to get a little bit more granular about what job boards are going to be most effective, what communities you should be working with, and even events. So it honestly depends, but yeah, job boards can be incredibly effective. Different advertising channels can be incredibly effective. So LinkedIn is probably the most widely used in terms of job boards, besides maybe Google jobs. And then you also have places like Reddit where advertising your jobs to more technical audiences has also shown to be pretty effective as well. So again, it's about creating these tailored strategies to reach the right people at the right time with the right message.
Okay, thank you. Challenges of this job.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm not a fully baked marketing organization. So one of my skill sets that I have to pride myself on is getting people to do things on top of their existing job, which is very nuanced, but it's a good skill to know.
How do you do that? Powers of persuasion, or how do you do it? I'm just curious because that is a good skill.
It's lots of positivity. It's trying to make sure that people who are leaning into the work. So let's take recently I just launched a video all about the making of a new device that we had at Samsara, why it's innovative, why it's exciting, our approach to it, potential scaled impact. And I want to highlight people and give them something to feel celebrated around, to be able to highlight their work and impact, and something that they can hang their hat on. And so that's often an angle that I like to take is I want to get your voice and your perspective in this and be able to share this and show give you something that you can sort of put in your resume or just feel sort of acknowledged by. So there's a lot of ways to do that piece. It's easier to get individual like employees to engage with my work because it is a potential to be highlighted and seen by the rest of the organization. Trying to get, say, designers and videographers and to help with my work. I need a lot of, I think, like leadership representation. So I need to have a good stakeholder that is going to advocate for my work. So,
oh, wow. Like an executive sponsor, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Wow. And do you have one? I'm assuming you have more than one.
Yeah, I work fairly closely with like recruiting. They've been a great executive sponsor. Marketing has also been a good executive sponsor because when I joined Samsara, they were at such a fast growth stage. They're about to IPO. They knew this was a critical need, which for me makes my job so much easier to come in and be able to create immediate impact. Okay. And so I had a good representation of marketing. I personally sit on the comms team, which is a nice sort of anchor between marketing, internal communications, and people who are they're a highly collaborative team already. So I found a nice place there.
Nice.
But I think the challenge of the work is really how do you get leaders to understand what you do, get really clear about the type of team they're trying to build, and be able to go out, get their time on a regular basis to help do some of that marketing work, advocate on behalf of the company when they are already on a time crunch. I would say also like working with engineers, there's a similar dynamic there of like engineers are so busy, they don't necessarily have all of like the communication prep that say like sales or marketing folks would have. So you have to do a little bit more prep work with them and make sure that they feel prepared and ready. So it's the challenge is really like getting people to do work on top of work.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. Before we go into the benefits of doing this kind of work, both for you as well as for the company, I want to ask, do you work with staffing firms or is all the recruiting just directly done?
Recruiting is all in-house, yeah.
So you have corporate recruiters and talent teams, but you don't, I see. Interesting model. Okay, so the benefits, both for you personally of doing this job and for the company, what are you seeing?
Yeah. Just on that last note, like working with staffing companies, working versus like in-house, talent branding does a lot of enablement. So making sure that you have like very prescriptive messaging, resources that they can leverage on an ongoing basis. Like I worked pretty heavily on all of our like mobile texting messaging and making sure that like this is in line with our branding, tone and voice, and making sure that there is a consistent experience. Whether someone is in-house versus being contracted. So that was just a quick note there.
Okay, got it. So the benefits.
Yes, I love my job. I love talent branding, and I think it's because I get to work with people that I see on a regular basis. I get to tell their stories. I get to help celebrate their work. I love the storytelling side of this and the creativity that can come with work like this. I love data. I love building marketing funnels and seeing like metric driven impact. So I love sort of all of it, which has been great. And
for the company perspective, so there is data involved. It's also you have to say you do this, these are the results. Okay, and you handle that as well. So for the company, what is the benefit you're seeing?
So from my work, I would say talent branding can have an impact in a few very specific ways. Like you can look at high-level branding metrics, which brand professionals will tell you, like always measuring brand and seeing like immediate impact and results isn't always the easiest thing because there's so many ways that a view or an impression can translate into different actions. but
Sure.
we look a lot at our social reach and content reach. I do both like quantitative and qualitative, so I can actually see number of candidates coming into our funnel, from which channels, how they're converting, the quality of those candidates, whether they make it past a recruiting phone screen or not. And I also am able to, longer term down the road, look at the retention rates of whether these people have stuck around. But that's more outside of my control. I also do like surveys for new hires. So when they come in, I ask like, how well did you know Samsara before joining? What was your initial impression of them? How did that impression change? What was the key motivators for joining? And so I really try to get curious about the people that are coming in, since they tend to be more engaged with providing that information. And since I've joined, we've seen, a 20% awareness rate. And within this year, we're now at 40%. So we're seeing that market penetration come pretty quickly, considering it's been a couple of years.
I'm just curious because, I deal with so many different groups in this line of work. Do you see specifically the value of branding for the extended workforce?
Is it extended workforce? Is that like contracting?
The freelancing contractors, independent contractors. It could also be gig workers.
Yeah.
It depends on how there's so many names. I try to say extended because, they're not employees.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think my experience with contract workers isn't as robust, to be totally frank. I could see there's also a thing with like seasonal workers where like, people come
they would also fall under the same category.
Yeah. And I've talked to people from like Home Depot and Lowe's, and it's really interesting how they build up campaigns around those seasons, because you do need to have, if you're going to have these labor needs, then you do need to maintain a positive brand. And it's pretty critical so that, Home Depot versus Lowe's, like who is going to get that top talent, bring them back. And especially when I think these like hourly part-time jobs or seasonal jobs are getting even harder to fill. So I would say that's probably like some of the most competitive areas, and being able to, and I think it's also a lot of like salary conversations and showing that there might be potential for full-time and what that would look like. And it's interesting.
But Samsara, do you have a number? Like, I guess most of your workforce is employee, or is it like?
I would say the super heavy majority of our workforce is full-time. Yeah, we don't rely as heavily on contractors compared to perhaps other companies.
But obviously there must be some contracting, which is why you're doing the branding for them as well, right?
We actually don't do branding for contract roles, really. Okay. I would say in tech, I was like sort of talking about those talent gaps. It's predominantly like sales and engineering that is hyper competitive at the moment.
Right. Okay. What's your vision for the future of talent branding?
Oh my gosh, there is.
What are you thinking?
There's so many things up in the air right now that, we're in an election cycle. Like there's just so much that could potentially happen. Right. And, I'm thinking over the next few years, this talent gap is going to widen. We're going to see a swing of power back to employees, which will be good for people maybe looking for more flexibility. I think that companies are going to have to consider several options when it comes to maintaining their workforce, which would be either upskilling existing employees to fill critical needs. They will have to either create like more work flexibility so that they can hire from other markets, specifically in the United States. But also there might be more international plays that are going to happen. If you look towards like India or Eastern Europe, There are incredible numbers of incredibly talented engineers that are looking for work, but there is complexity to expanding globally when you have an organization that needs to consider like culture and management, and how does that all fit together effectively and in a seamless way. So people are going to have to get more creative. And this is more of a speculation as well, but I do see jobs in general becoming a little bit more contract or like shorter term. The decline of jobs is just happening so much more frequently. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether, talent, like how talent is going to adapt to shorter cycles of work periods as well, and how companies are going to try and leverage that, whether they lean more into it or they really look towards retention and upskilling instead.
So what can employers do, just like really quickly, to promote their talent brand? And can you give me 2 instances of something that has been done that really impressed you or resonated with you?
Yeah, I think the first step is acknowledging that there is a place that the market is getting more competitive, and we can't just simply have a larger recruiting organization to just reach out to as many people as possible. Like talent branding really helps reduce costs in terms of talent acquisition, and similar to how branding would help reduce costs for acquiring new customers. And I think the first step is really thinking about who you need in your organization, and then actually investing in someone to help drive that. I think talent branding in terms of ROI is incredibly high. You have one person to come in who can help distill messaging, help create those initial like core anchor stories, and help polish that and make a consistent experience. It can have huge impacts from what I've seen from my colleagues, but also from what I've seen from my own work. And I think companies that have done this well, Airbnb, I think, is probably like a great best in class example where you look at 2020 when they went through layoffs. The way that they handled that was so conscious of their employee base and really trying to do more than what is expected. And that allowed them to shoot back and be able to hire back so many people, but also still stay relevant and interesting and not lose a sense of trust with talent more broadly. Versus if you look at some other layoffs and how they were conducted where, someone just pops on the screen and they're like, sorry, this is not going to work out anymore. There's a huge loss of trust that happens within that. And so I think the companies that I see ready to do talent branding, one, acknowledge that there needs to be more investment in the employee experience more broadly, and also can see that there is going to be a competitive market coming up. And I think the companies that do this best are the ones that aren't trying to be everything to everyone. They know what value employees are going to get out of this, and are able to highlight that while also being pretty honest about the trade-offs in that experience. So I can speak based on Samsara, but we are a fast growth company, with 35+% year-over-year growth at the moment, and we can offer work that is going to be connected to a strong sense of purpose of safety, efficiency, sustainability. You'll have access to lots of challenges that you'll be able to tackle and learn and grow from. It's not going to be a strong place for work-life balance. That's not what Samsara is going to be about. It's going to be challenging, and it's going to be engaging, and the expectation is that this person will lean in and learn and grow and move at the same pace that everyone else in the team is doing.
Thank you. If you had to give 1 or 2 pieces of advice, what would it be?
Um, don't try to be everything to everyone. I think that's a big one. And also, I think transparency is underrated in that sense. I think like people really find transparency refreshing. Especially, I think if you look a few years ago, I think a lot of people were going to company awards, trying to have the best Glassdoor, trying to show like what an amazing culture we are. But I think if you can be more upfront about like, here's who we are, what we're doing, and be able to have enough data points behind that to really represent it, it's going to be attractive to quite a few people. That should create a large enough pool for you to pull from and help you hire effectively. But I see that there's so many ways this can go. So.
Yeah. No, I guess you're saying be authentic. Be authentic, because you don't want to represent yourself as a company as being something you're not. Mm-hmm. Be authentic and you'll attract the right people. Well, that was awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. It was wonderful talking to you. Great insights, and we really enjoyed the conversation.